Hello, I'm Jimmy Bach, and this is History of Jimmy along with my producer, and we have a special guest today. One of my mentors was involved in starting the Historical Society with some other folks here. He's donated a lot of items. His family is very prominent here, and today he's going to speak about one of his family members, which is very prominent in the area. At this time, I'm going to introduce now retired attorney Brian Caverly. Brian, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jim Chandler. Yeah, my name's Brian Caverly. I'm a lifelong resident of Shickshinny. I can proudly say that. Unlike, well, I probably did the same thing. When I was in school, I swore that I would never come back to Shickshinny. I'd leave and venture out somewhere else. But that wasn't true, and I wound up spending my life here, and I'm very happy that I have. It's a beautiful town. It's a great place to live. The people are nice, the surroundings are nice, so I'm very happy to be here today and talk about this. But my family goes back here at Shickshinny to probably the mid-1850s, early 1860s. My great-grandfather, who was my mother's grandfather, Jesse Beadle, was the first of the family members who came here to live. Jesse Beadle was one of 13 family members, as best we figure, who was born of John and Jane Beadle in Durham County, England. They came to this country when Jesse Beadle was 5, I believe, and they originally lived in Nanticoke. Or, I'm sorry, they originally went to St. Clair down in Schuylkill County. At some point in time, after working in the mines in Schuylkill County, and he worked his way up to being a supervisor, I believe. He moved up to Nanticoke, and he operated the Nanticoke mines for 3 or 4 years until he moved to Shickshinny in 1856, 1857, as best we know. He lived in a house on Main Street in Shickshinny with his family, which was later owned by the Ellingers, right next door to the old Center Theater. And while living there, they built the house at 66 West Union Street, which when I was growing up was known as the Beadle Mansion and is now called the Caverly Mansion, although it's really the Beadle Mansion. In any event, he lived here for the rest of his life. He had 7 children. He had 4 daughters and 3 sons. One of those sons was my grandfather, or my great-grandfather, my mother's father, George Beadle. The 3 boys, George and his brother Robert and his brother Henry, followed their father in the coal business. They pretty much operated in western Pennsylvania in Degas mines, in the bituminous fields out there. Jesse Beadle was similar to some of the coal operators in the anthracite field. He would buy up acreage, large acreage, and they would mine the acreage and extract oil and gas if it was there, the timber, and then they would sell off the land. So his sons operated that business in western Pennsylvania. Jesse stayed here, and he operated the mines, as I say, in Shickshinny. He originally was in Mackinac when he moved here from Nanticoke, and he operated the mines there for the DuPont family until several years later he came across the river and operated a mine in what would be now the Stackhouse Breaker area, in an area that was called Beadle Basin after him. He built apparently the first breaker there, and I think at one time his mining took place next to the Stackhouses, who I believe ultimately bought up all the interest there and ran the entire area, including Beadle Basin. Jesse Beadle, in addition to being a mine operator there, was a prospector. He and his brother Nimrod, or Uncle Nim, were prospectors who apparently were known across the country for their skill in locating coal and other minerals. He and Nimrod operated coal works in Forest City, which of course is at the other end of the northern coal field. Shickshinny's the beginning, Forest City's the end. And they operated some mines up in that area. He also went around the country in Virginia, West Virginia, Alabama, and prospected and bought coal interests there. He ultimately came back to Shickshinny, and either at the same time or later did some inventing. He invented with a brother-in-law, Mr. Dado, married to one of his sisters, something called the miner's squib. This happened when he was still in St. Clair, and it was a device that was used to set off charges in the mines. Essentially, it allowed the miner to light the fuse and get out of the mine before the explosion went off. He operated in St. Clair and later had a store up in Plymouth that sold the squibs. He also invented a form of rail line that was used in the mines, an narrow gauge line. Somebody told me is also the gauge that's used in Switzerland for their rail lines. He invented a couple different braces, drill braces, and other items that mostly had to do with coal mining, coal cars and such. He ultimately was the founder of the First National Bank of Shickshinny. He bought the land there from the Craries, who were one of the founders of Shickshinny, and built the First National Bank of there on that location. He was the first president of the bank, and basically that's what he did for the rest of his life until he died in age 98, I believe, in the early 1920s. I never met the man, of course, because I'm not quite old enough for that. My mother knew him. My mother would visit here. Her father, as I said, was George, who was Jesse's son, and they lived in Brockway out in Jefferson County, and they would visit here often, and my mother remembers him fondly. Jesse also had a farm. He was a farmer in addition to the other things he did. And he had two farms called Sunshine and Shadow, of all places. It was located in Sunshine, out, I believe, where the Protestant church is located out there.
Oh.
Sunshine was the area where the fields were the sun shone. And the other farm was in the lee of the mountain, I guess, in the shadow of the mountain. So Sunshine and Shadow. My mother spent a lot of time here visiting her grandfather. She was here in, I think, when she was not too long before he died, when the first wooden bridge across the Susquehanna burned. She was here that night to witness the fire on the Susquehanna River. Jesse Beadle's sons carried on for him after he died, although they all didn't have a long lifetime. The oldest of his sons was Robert Beadle, who I didn't know any of them. Robert died 2 years before I was born. But they followed a form of English primogeniture, which held that the assets, at least the control of them in a family, passed to the oldest living son. And when everybody else died off, Uncle Rob, as my mother called him, basically took care of the investments and so forth of Jesse Beadle. He was instrumental in setting up a trust and a corporation for the Beadles that just within the last 10 or 15 years have ended. I have a lot of cousins across the country who are descendants of Jesse Beadle. Unfortunately, only 2 of his children ever married. Bessie Beadle, who married a George Warren, who was the minister of the Methodist Church here in Shickshinny at the time. And George Beadle, my grandfather, who married a Mary Jane McMeekin from Brockway, They lived in Brockway, and my mother lived there until she graduated from college and moved here to Shickshinny. In a sense, she was the representative of the Beadle family that came here to look after interests that the Beadles had in the Shickshinny area. They renovated the house up there in 1935 when they moved in. And it stayed in our family until my youngest daughter inherited it after my mother died, until she and her husband sold it to the current owners. And I just would mention that my mother would be very proud of the way the house has been kept up and looks. She'd be very happy to see the condition it's in, and would also be happy to know how many kids there are up there. When I was a kid, all the kids in town ran up and down that hill and played in the backyard. So she would be very pleased as to what has transpired. That's basically it, unless you have questions.
I do. Now, where did they come from country-wise, the Beadles?
Well, they originally were from England, Durham County, England. Both he and his wife, her name was Oldknow, her last name, Jane Oldknow.
Okay.
Ann Oldknow, Jane was her mother. They were from Durham County, England. And Jesse came here with his family. There were 17 kids in his family.
Wow.
And they came here and, as I said, moved to St. Clair. He met his wife, Anna Oldknow. Again, she was from the same area, came here, and they met up here. And I'm not sure where they met, but they got married and were married for 60-some years before she died. And as I said, they had 7 children among them.
Wow. So you could say Jesse was very influential in the development of Shickshinny as well, with the bank and different things. Did he also have a mill someplace, or involved in a mill on the creeks?
Well, he had a foundry.
A foundry.
That was located, if anybody knows where the old railroad station was, it was located between the railroad station and the Susquehanna River.
Okay.
And I guess was quite successful. It burned in the late 1800s from what I've read. And I would have no idea what it was. I've never seen a trace of it.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not sure of any other businesses he had here other than coal mining and farming and, that mill.
Yeah, I know you gave us a book showing his drawings and stuff, and of course I heard about him from you previously and stuff, and so I'm glad that we're able to hear this. And for everybody out there, this is my mentor. That's how I'm able to do tours, because I've learned so much history from Brian. And like I said, it was very nice to have somebody that I could go back and ask questions to and find out about the history, because that's what this is all about, helping preserve local history. And just found out about Sunshine today, so that was interesting. So where the Sunshine Church is and Sunshine Road is where you're talking
Jesse
about.
Beadle at the farm.
Yes.
Well, the only reason Jim calls me his mentor is because I'm older than him, and he assumes I would know who all these people are.
Well, but like I said, it's very nice because you've donated a lot. You've donated this. You said this came out of your mother's attic?
Yeah, this was in my mother's attic. It is a plan of the town of Shickshinny, dated 1857.
Yep.
That's when Shickshinny was established. The proprietors of Shickshinny were George W. Search, Lot Search, Nathan Garrison, and Nathan Crary. The 4 of them bought the land that had originally been in the Sist family. Mrs. Sist was a daughter of Samuel Austin, who was reputed to be the first settler of Shickshinny. But they bought the land, 290-some acres, and laid out Shickshinny. And this is the original map showing Shickshinny. There are still a couple items that exist today. One of them is what was Yaples Hotel. It's on the corner of Union and Main Street. Directly across from it was the First National Bank of Shickshinny. It isn't depicted here because it didn't exist at that point. When I was a kid, the railroad station was there. the foundry, I believe, was probably in this area on the map. You can see the old canal system that went through Shickshinny. There was an aqueduct that took it across the creek here, a dry dock for the boats, and this was some kind of a backup of the water for the canal system. And at that point, there was not a bridge across the Susquehanna for vehicular and foot traffic, but there was a bridge that went across for rail traffic.
Yeah, yep, that's shown on there, yes.
It is shown on
Yeah,
there.
and we do have a picture of the aqueduct, which is right over there on the wall. I found that on eBay, and because I never knew it existed and stuff, so, okay.
Well, you can see in 1857, there was not a lot of development here. This is the area that later became known as Parker Hill. I live up on Furnace Street, which is right in this area here. That's my house. But the houses, I think, that were developed at the time had buildings on them. This building is what we've always known as Bertzel's Church,
Okay.
the Bible Baptist Church, and that building was there then. And as I understand it, that was the initial building that housed not only the Bible Baptist Church ultimately, but the Methodist Church and the Presbyterian churches before they built their own buildings.
Right.
So there wasn't a lot here then, and one of the histories I read indicated that when Jesse Beadle came here from Nanticoke, there were only 50 houses in the town. We're quickly getting back to that
Yes,
situation
absolutely,
now,
yeah, that's,
unfortunately,
yeah,
being the victim of floods.
Yes,
But,
that's exactly right. Well, Brian, I want to thank you very much for coming and doing this episode. This is episode 29. I hope that you'll watch this episode and click on like and subscribe. It gets more people to come and know about the museum. And again, I want to thank Brian for coming and doing this and continue to give me history so that I can pass it on to others. So, Brian, thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it.
I'll be happy to do that, Jim. You're just going to have to show me how.
Okay, we will do that. So on behalf of Chandler, my producer, myself, and Brian Caverly, thank you very much for watching. This is episode 29. We're going to do 30 next. So thank you very much.